Welcome everybody, my name is Anton Wieslander from the Darena solutions team, and today I'm going to show you how you can build a CDS hook service which is going to launch a smart application from our MelderX platform. Let's go ahead and jump in. So before we begin, I just kind of want to explain the process of why we're doing CDS hooks and launching a smart application. So let me go ahead and launch this slide presentation and give myself a laser pointer. So imagine you're a provider in a hospital, a patient comes to visit you, and the patient brings along a bunch of information with them. So they have some kind of problem, the provider has to make a decision. Do they have allergies? Do they have, what kind of information is associated with the patient, right? Based on all of this information, the provider needs to quickly make a decision, and that is a very talked about problem currently. This is why a lot of people want to put AI into healthcare, where you just add an AI application, you feed all of this data to the AI, and then the provider can just talk to the AI, and the AI will just spit out the answers and help inform the provider about what decisions should be made. So a question is, okay, how do you integrate the AI into the EHR, which holds all of this information? So how do you facilitate the movement of this information? This is where CDS hooks come in. So the parts on the top, the configuration, the decision support system. This is our CDS hook, which is going to ingest this information and then present it to the provider in a form of a card, which the provider can then use to perhaps launch this application for more information, to explore some diagrams or see this information in a different way. Okay. And there is also an option of submitting feedbacks of this application. So whatever feedback is going to be submitted can actually be fed back to the AI that is powering this application, and then the AI itself can be improved. Okay. So today we're interested in the two specific parts of building a CDS hook. So a decision support system. So how do we integrate into the EHR and provide additional functionality? And an easy access to your application, which can effectively enhance the EHR experience. Okay. So let's go ahead and close this. I am already logged into the MelderX platform, which is going to be playing the role of an EHR. And we talk about this in our numerous other videos of how we can use the MelderX platform to extend current FHIR systems, where you just slap MelderX on top of it and you get all of this functionality that we're building in here. Okay. So if you aren't signed in into MelderX yet, please go ahead and do so. All the links, by the way, are going to be in the description, including for the code, and all of the resources that I'm going to use here are going to be available there. All right. So another thing that you want to have handy is the CDS hook specification. It's on the shorter side. We're not going to be reading all of it. I'm just going to be referring to it in order to say, why things are the way they are. The same I'm going to be doing with the FHIR specification. We're going to be working with FHIR, so you want the FHIR specification open, and the smart app launch. Again, I'm just going to be referring to this to say this is the way things are, and if everybody does the same things in the development world, we are going to be happy. Okay. So another thing that I have open on the side here is VS Code. This is where I'm going to be programming the CDS hook service and the smart application. Okay. Another thing I forgot to mention is I'm going to be using a tool called ngrok, so I can develop locally without having to deploy my application anywhere and still integrate with the MelderX system. Okay, so if you don't have ngrok, I recommend you do it. Make an account. It's free, and it's a very, very, very useful tool. I cannot overstate it. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to close ngrok. I'm going to keep the other documentations open. We're going to come back to MelderX, and we're going to start off with creating a standalone workspace. And I'm just going to say that this is to test the CDS hook demo. Test CDS hook demo, sure. So fresh workspace, I have no patience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to import some data. The Alice Newman CDA is present in the code base. So again, go ahead, download that, and you can effectively follow the same steps I am doing here. I'm going to go ahead and upload that. So the data is uploaded, and here's the patient. So to simulate an EHR, we can effectively open up the patient, and here we have all of the data. Okay, so allergy, care plan, conditions, etc. Alerts is the place where the CDS hook cards, or sorry, CDS cards are going to be displayed. Okay, and the act. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the patient. The act of opening a patient is an event occurring in the EHR system, and it is a well-known hook, or sort of an event that can trigger a CDS hook, or that a CDS hook can be built around. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a hook that is working around this event. Okay, so let me come back to the specification, version 2.0 here. And to trigger this hook, I'm effectively going to be just refreshing this page, and that should just trigger it. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and start building a CDS hook. So it is just a RESTful API that starts, that has a couple of endpoints. One of them is the discovery endpoint. It is sitting on /CDS services. So let's come back over here and let's do our initial setup. So I'll say this is CDS hook service. I'm gonna open up the terminal, and I'm gonna go into CDS hook. I'm gonna initialize an npm package. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this. I'm gonna be using JavaScript for all of this. I think JavaScript is the simplest one of them, where you can just see the endpoints and effectively port it to your own preferred language of choice. Okay, so I'm gonna initialize a npm project, and I'm just gonna select the default options for everything. Here's the package.json, and in here I'm gonna add a dependency, which is express, and the version is whatever it's gonna pop up, the latest one. Okay, I'm gonna save that, and I'm going to install that. There we go. So the node modules have installed. I should now be able to make an express application, which is going to be an API. So let's just go ahead and make index.js. In here, I will import express, so require express. You do app by calling express here. And then on the app, you can listen to a port. So the port that I'll choose is 4433. And the callback, I'll just console log that I have started the application. Okay. We will then want to add a couple of endpoints. So I can't remember exactly which ones it is. There we go. So get. So let's just do hello world for now. We have a request, a response, and on the response, I think you can just send hello world. Okay. So I think this is the simplest possible application I can run. So at the bottom, I'll make the code a little bit bigger. I know some people are watching from smaller or from bigger screens or smaller screens. So node, we just supply the index file to node, and this should run the JavaScript code, and the API should be started. So I did specify the port to be 4433. So if I just select localhost 4433 on the root routes, we're gonna get hello world. I'll just make this a little bit bigger. If let's say I want JSON, so I'm just gonna restart here, refresh, that should do it automatically. I think the only thing we're gonna have to do is add the JSON middleware. So app use on express, we will have JSON. So this is going to be needed if we want to be able to post JSON. So I'll just leave this here for now, uncommented, just so we can see the effect in case you are working with an API and I don't know if you're using Java or Go, whatever, and it doesn't support JSON from the get-go and you need to enable, just know that you're going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect. Okay. So I'm just going to turn off that API, and let's start with implementing the CDS hook. So we have a CDS service route. I'm going to go ahead, put this here, and let's go ahead and drop this on a new line, and I'm going to return a response sent from here, actually. Just have a void return, okay? And we're going to send something back. I will give it a little bit more space and drop down the terminal for now, okay? So the request is super simple, and the response should be an object containing services, okay? So we have an object. It's going to contain services, and services is an array of CDS services, okay? So we give it an array, and here's the description for a CDS service, and here are some of the things that are required and optional. So the hooks that I already showed you, if I open this in a new tab, this is going to be your order selected hook, your patient view hook. So patient view is what we're interested in, and the number on the end is the maturity level. So I think 5 is mature, yeah. So this is already kind of like an established standard, let's say. But yeah, let's say we're going to grab patient view. We're going to close this, and we're going to specify an object here, and we're going to set the hook. So this is going to be a patient view hook, a hook that works around a patient view event. So the title is, we're just going to say title hello. We then have the description. Let's say test hello, or like say hello to patient, okay? So title is recommended, required, ID. So an identifier is pretty important. It's the way to identify this hook or refer to it later, okay? So I'm just going to say 0001. Prefetch and usage requirements are optional, but the prefetch is important because you're effectively gonna give whoever is calling your hook some information about what data you're expecting, okay? Since we're gonna be saying hello to a patient, we will want patient information. So I will put prefetch here, and I will comment it out, because if we just want to start with hello world, we don't really need a patient, any patient information. So I'll just leave it blank here, okay? Let's go ahead and start this. I'm gonna refresh here. We're not gonna have a page, and we will want CDS services, okay? So here's what this looks like. Good. Now what we want is, I will split this window in two, and I will want ngrok. I think you say HTTP, HTTPS, HTTP maybe, and 4433. Maybe that's, nope, that was incorrect. Ngrok, let's just type help real quick. It doesn't help that I'm working on a really small real estate. So ngrok HTTP 80. Okay, so it was, what did I do wrong? HTTP 4433. I think that was correct. It's just not showing up here. If I make this a little bit, just so I can verify this. Okay, so no, that was correct. Never mind. So let me go ahead and actually, this is going to be very painful on such a small screen, and we don't need to fiddle about with ngrok for so much. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open up a new terminal. That's just going to work away in the background, okay? And here I should have a little bit more real estate, okay? The URL here, we're going to grab it. I press the Windows copy key there. Okay, there we go. I'm going to open this here and say, yes, I want to visit this, and I want my CDS services, okay? So now my application is available on the wider web, and well, I can effectively use it as if it was live, all right, but without actually having to deploy it anywhere. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that running over there, and stopping this application here sure will kind of, well, kill off the connection here. but restarting it should just make it work again. Okay, so I'll just stop it, make my changes, start it again, and that's going to be the general flow here. This is the CDS service. It is now discoverable. So what we can actually do is come back to MelderX and go to extensions, workspace extensions, and register new extensions. So we have a couple of other options where you can build a CDS hook service based on CQL, and we have a CQL builder over here. I'm not going to get too deep into these. Well, not deep. I'm not going to get into these at all. We're just going to use our service over here. Okay. So let's go ahead, place this here. And for the example here, you can see it starts with CDS service. And then as part of the specification, the way that you invoke a service, let's say discovery example. Yep, that's the return, calling a CDS service. So you need to make a HTTP request, a post request to a URL that looks like this. Okay. So in the background, our service is going to be making a request to this hook when we open up a patient. Okay. So here's the URL. Let's go ahead, and this is going to be my 001 extension, register. Okay. So return to the extension. So once we have actually created this extension, it's just created for the workspace. We now have to enable it. We go to activate extensions, activate extension, this workspace extensions, and we're going to select this 001 extension that I have just added. Okay. I'm going to activate it. So now that this is activated, once I actually refresh this, you will see we're going to get an error, unable to get cards list, but this is happening because of the CDS service that we currently have doesn't have the endpoint for generating a card. Okay, so let's go ahead and start implementing this endpoint. I'm going to go ahead and drop down the terminal. Just going to copy this over here. So CDS services, and we're going to get an identifier. So console log, we will have our ID. So on the request query, or is it params ID? And then we're also going to have the body. So this is going to be very useful to see what is actually being sent to the API as part of this. Okay. So in the response, we're just going to send an empty string for now. And yeah, I think that's it. Obviously, or maybe not so obviously, we're going to say, okay, once this is 001, our identifier, we want to perform some logic. And if you're hosting a whole plethora of services as a CDS service, you know, you might want some kind of discovery logic here, etc. We're not going to talk about that sort of stuff. So anyway, here's the service. I'm going to go ahead, open this, restart, come back, and actually have the terminal open. I'm going to refresh the window here. And we still get unable to get cards list. It's probably because, yeah, so I just copy pasted this. This is get, this is get. This should be post. Okay, there we go. Let me restart this. And let me refresh this. So, okay, there we go. So we started ID 001, body is undefined. We are sending the payload as JSON. The payload is also described here. So this is what the payload will look like. Obviously skipped off of it really quickly. So I don't think there's too much point in discussing this right now. So let's go ahead, give this a quick refresh. And I'm going to refresh this again. Okay. So we still get an error, but the call is successful in the fact that we're sending the data. We can now do some work with it. And here's the prefetch, which later on we can fill with FHIR data that is contained within our workspace. Okay, but for now, let's just make a compliant response to the specification so that we can actually just start displaying some kind of alert that can be used to open an application. Okay, so let's quickly go, so this is an example payload, the providing FHIR resources. So we have prefetch templates, tokens, CDS service response. So let's go ahead and open that. We want to respond with 200, and we want to respond with an object that contains cards. Okay, so let's come back here. I am going to be sending JSON back, and it's going to be an object. Oh, wrong keybind for me. Go ahead and move this into the if statement, and we're gonna have cards, an array of cards, and I'm just gonna generate one card. You can generate multiple cards. Maybe you want to do multiple things, but the way a card should look like, so UUID is optional. We have a summary. Let's say summary, hello world. Have some details, indicator. So the indicator is some of the values that we can have is info, warning, and critical. So let's just say info. You can make it critical if you want to spice things up. Source. So source is an object, and you can see the link is not too visible, but you can jump to how the source object should look like. Okay. So source required label, and the label is a string, and say test service. Okay. The rest of the things are optional, and one thing I just want to point to here as we're going through this, the rest of the stuff is optional. You have the links. So if we take a look at the links, you will see that you can effectively add any URL that you want to launch, and the type of link can be a smart app. So this is a little bit of foreshadowing that you can attach a link to your card, which is going to, if you press it, it's going to open your application. Okay. So let's come back to the card response. I think we did fill the minimum requirements. Let me go ahead and save this. I'm going to restart the application. I'm going to reload the dashboard. Okay. We should have an alert now. And here we have from the test service, hello world. Perfect. Let's go ahead and add a link real quick. So it was links, I think, and let's not guess, let's double check. So we have links, an array of links. So links is an object, and we have a label. So let's start with super simple, just Google it, and we have URL and type required. URL, I'll say https google.com, and the type will be absolute. Okay, let's restart, come back, go here, give it a refresh, and there we have it. So if I open it, I have Google. Perfect. So for now, we will leave it like this. We actually want to start doing something a little bit more complicated now. Okay, we're getting a hang of CDS hooks. We're displaying what applications we have, and we have the response. In between here sits, your application logic, and we're seeing here the body that we are getting some information about which FHIR server is effectively involved in the context of this hook invocation, and perhaps some prefetch data. So let's talk a little bit more about prefetch, since I think that's the next coherent thing to do, where we want to, rather than saying hello world, we're gonna greet the patient. Okay, so prefetch, let's come back here, and CDS hooks, we're gonna take a look at the prefetch templates. All right, so in the prefetch, you can specify a key and then a FHIR query. The specification talks about the parameters in the FHIR query to be limited to reduce complexity. I would say just try to keep the FHIR query here simple. Otherwise, the two things that you can mainly do here is either build up a simple query, or you can get a specific resource. So we're just going to do the two examples. and also you get templating. So based on the context variables, the templating will be done on the client side. So the thing that is going to be invoking your service, the templating should be done on that side. And once you have defined the template on your side here, once they have called the discovery endpoint, they're aware what the template should be filled with. Okay. So we're going to ask for a patient. And I guess just to come back to the templating parameters, the variables that you can fill the template with are kind of predefined by the specification, okay? And are standard. We'll have this context.patient ID. So patient, we will want to load the patient resource with the following identifier, okay? So whatever patient we're looking at, we're expecting that patient record to be provided to us, all right? So I'm gonna stop this here, and we are caching the information that we retrieved from the discovery endpoint. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna duplicate this tab, and I'm gonna show you how you can access this on your API, because you have the cookie in your browser, so you have access to the API here. If we go to API instead of workspaces, so API, your workspace ID, and CDS services, your what's it called? Your workspace effectively acts as a CDS service as well, right? So whatever CDS services you load into there, you may point to an external one. You may load up one as a CQL file or a bunch of Elm files. These CDS services start to, well, basically your workspace is the base URL for CDS services as well. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So we have none because I have actually stopped the API and we haven't refetched the metadata. So I'm going to go ahead and start it again, refresh it, and this information is cached for 1 minute. So if things don't update instantly, just wait a minute and it should be available to you. Okay. So we can see the prefetch here is now available. If we come back here, I'm just going to refresh this, come back to the code, and now we can see that the patient resource is available over here, okay, in the prefetch object. All that's left for me to do now is go to the request body, which we're logging here, right? So this is the body. Let's say I will want the name. So request body prefetch patient. Let me go ahead and take the patient out. So patient name is going to be an array, and we're going to have a given, that's an array as well. And then we're going to have a family name. So I'm just going to put this somewhere over here, and family. There we go. So those are the two things. I will now want an interpolated string over here. Let's say, actually, I'll just put it here. Like that. Okay, so we get the patient and we want to say hello to this patient. We extract the first given name and the family name. All right, let's go ahead and give this a refresh. Refresh this as well. And there we go, have it, right? So the workspace, upon this patient view event being raised or happening, we go ahead, call the service with the correct prefetch parameters, and whatever the service does, it goes ahead and produces a card. So let's explore the other option in the prefetch, which was the query example. I'm going to go ahead over here and we're going to see that we have all data conditions. So we have 6 conditions over here. Okay. Let's say conditions. And I'm going to go to the FHIR specification, to documentation, to all search parameters registry. So these are all the search parameters that are available. And I'm going to search for the condition. So I can see on the right hand side a bunch of orange hairs. Here are all the condition parameters. And I'm just going to look for P, patient. So patient, subject, these parameters tend to have similar names, but we should be able to use the patient query search parameter to find all the conditions relating to the patient. Okay. Note that you are working from the perspective of the provider. So if you don't tailor this correctly, the provider may send you information that, that is not specific to the patient. Okay. So condition where we query that the patient should be equal to the context patient ID. Okay. And then you can do other things like maybe if you're querying for allergy intolerances, you may want to specify a specific code, etc. You should be able to do it in this query. Okay. So we've added that. Let's go ahead, reload. I'm going to go ahead and reload the EHR. And there we have it. So conditions is a bundle, and we have the 6 entries in there. Okay. So this is a standard, a FHIR bundle with the search set result. Okay. So now you would work with it as if you would work with a regular bundle. Okay. I personally, I'm not going to be building any logic against the bundle. This is just to show you that, yeah, you can grab a patient resource, or you can grab multiple resources about that patient. You can effectively pre-query the FHIR API using the prefetch. Okay. And that's what's happening there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the launch part of the tutorial. So instead of the CDS hook, alongside, we're going to go ahead and build our app. And actually, it's probably going to get generated by some kind of tool. So we are going to leave our node application running. We're going to leave our ngrok application running as well. We're going to get a new one. And for this, we're going to get a Vite application, or Vite. Okay. We're not going to be using any frameworks. We're going to use vanilla JavaScript. Okay. Actually, don't want to open Stack Blitz. I just want to create a template. So npm create Vite at latest, and I'll just call this app when I'm creating this. Okay. So let me remove the name, app. Run this. Again, I'm selecting vanilla. If you have a preference around what framework you want to use, go ahead and use that. Okay. I'm not going to be using TypeScript. I'm just going to be using JavaScript. And there we have it. So in here, let's go ahead and cd into the app. Clear. And first of all, I'm going to go to package.json. When I run this, so npm run dev, I haven't actually installed anything. So npm install. Okay, so let's run this. It's going to run on port 5173. So I'm going to stop that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to port 4434. Okay, so very close to our API. Our API is 4433. This is 4434. Okay, so if I run this again, there we have the new port. Okay, here we don't have to stop and start. We have the modern tooling of hot module reloading. Life is good. Okay, let's clean this application up a little bit. It does come with a bunch of stuff that we don't care about. So the main gist of this application and why I chose this particular thing is, well, first of all, we have a server from which we can serve the application. So let's go ahead and just serve it. That's what it looks like. And we have the count. Now we want to turn it into a smart application. We literally just have an HTML and it is loading some JavaScript. And we have just the modern tooling of available of importing, etc. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say, look, I don't need the styles. I don't need the images. I don't need this counter. And you can see it's all this is very primitive. It's literally just saying select an element and set this HTML to it with the following interpolation. It's as simple as it can get. Okay, I'm going to remove all of this. I'm going to remove the images so that they're out of the way. So I'm going to move this to trash. the styles, move it to trash. We don't need any of it. Index vite.svg, we don't have it. And yeah, so we just have the main.js, and we want to do a specific thing when the application launches, okay? Or maybe actually before we get there, we want to initialize the launch. So yeah, I think let's start there. I'm gonna close this tab where I have the CDS service. I'm gonna go to smart launch. And let's go ahead and take a look at the app smart launch. So the smart application can be launched in two ways: when you just launch the app, or where the EHR launches the app. So we are in an EHR, we're going to click on a link, and that is going to launch the app. So it's going to be an EHR launch that we want to be looking at, okay? So in the smart specification here, I want to look for launch app EHR launch. And if you read this, you're effectively going to see that, look, when you launch the application, you're going to land on something that looks like this, and the following parameters are going to be provided to the issuer and launch. Okay, so let's say, okay, if what I'm currently landing on is a window.location, and I think it's path name launch, do some kind of logic, okay? But before we get there, we actually want to redirect to there, okay? So let me keep the main over here. I'm going to close the rest, and I'm going to try not to be as not to be too confusing. There are a lot of moving parts, especially if you haven't touched this before. So we're going to go to CDS hooks. I'm going to go to index.js, and I'm going to add another link. Let's say my app, or get more information, or explore, some kind of message to say that you're opening your application here. We're going to be going to localhost 4434. And as we've seen in the smart application before, so where's this response? Where were the links? Type, we have to specify that it's a smart link, okay? So once we have specified that it's a smart link, it's going to be pointing to our application. Once you have deployed, it's going to be that URL. Let's go ahead back to the CDS hook, restart it, come back to the application here, refresh, go to alerts, and here we have my app. So I'm going to load this, and it's going to load my application, and we're going to see here in the URL, we're going to have the issuer and the launch code. So really quickly, coming back to here, let's just go ahead and see what we're working with here, just a little bit closer. Let me refresh here. So we're not seeing anything logged because we're not on /launch. So coming back here, let's actually distinct this URL to trigger specific logic, okay? I'm restarting the CDS hook service here as well. So I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna refresh this to get a new link. And by the way, this link from the beginning doesn't actually have the issuer and the launch code attached to it. Once you press the button, that's when those get generated and attached, okay? So now here in the console, I'm gonna be able to see the location. So I have my search parameter, and that will contain the launch and the issuer. Now, the important thing here is that without going too deep into the smart on FHIR specification, otherwise I'd have to explain auth and OpenID connects, which smart on FHIR is built on top of or integrates with, okay? You'd effectively want to go through an auth flow now, and in addition to going through an auth flow for the EHR launch, you just want to add the audience parameter, which is going to contain the what's called the FHIR server and an additional launch parameter, okay? So then effectively you started from the EHR, which has generated this launch parameter, which effectively contains some state or is a reference to the state that only the EHR understands. Once you go through the auth flow through the EHR again, the EHR can again pick up that launch code and provide you with additional contextual information. Okay, so what we are gonna need for our smart application is to actually implement the auth flow. So let's go ahead and Google for oidc client.ts. So I think this is the latest non-framework specific authentication client library for front-end JavaScript, and we're effectively going to be using it. Okay, so let's come back to our code. By the way, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Here's just the command that I'm going to be copying and pasting. Okay, I'm going to stop the application, install. Obviously, I don't have a $sign over here. Leave the save. Remove the $sign. So, installing the library. Just going to take a look at package.json. This is of the CDS hooks service. So I didn't. I'm just taking a look at the wrong package.json. So here in the dependencies, I can see the oidc client TS is now installed. Okay. Let's go ahead and rerun the application. npm run dev. There we have it. So coming back to main.js, this is where we're going to be using this library. And I apologize. I don't work on this library, but I'm going to apologize in advance of how crap and non-beginner friendly this is. So if you are new to this stuff, I am sorry. But you're going to go to the documentation and, you can read all of this. And I'm just going to say that, look, we want this user manager object where... I don't know if it's somewhere in the beginning it should say here, yeah. So user manager is like the higher level API, which gives you the controls of I want to sign in as a user, I want to sign out, etc. oidc client is closer to the protocol, so you get the raw things that are going through the protocol, and I'm gonna show you why that's relevant in a moment. Okay, so we want the user manager. Let's go ahead and import the user manager from oidc client TS. Okay, so const user manager equals new user manager, and we're going to be supplying some options. Some options include client ID. Where do we get the client ID from? Now this smart application has to be a valid client within the MailDirect's platform. Luckily for you, you can go back here, return to home, apps, and you can register your application. Okay, so this is going to be a provider application. Again, this is my application for 001 hook. Public, it's on the web, it cannot be confidential. If you're rolling a backend, it can be a confidential app. Otherwise, for the scopes, we want OpenID, profile, we want launch. So launch is the scope that says you're gonna get a launch code. You don't want to request a scope effectively. So if you do launch patient or launch encounter, when you're gonna be going through the auth flow, you're gonna say, I want to launch in the context of a patient. Then you select those two scopes. We are just doing a regular launch. We want to we're already gonna have a launch code given to us for a patient, okay? Or not really scope to a patient. Sorry, we're just gonna get given a launch scope which we're gonna supply, okay? And we'll just want to read all patient information, okay? So redirect URLs. I am on HTTP localhost 4434. Okay, and that's all the information that we're gonna need. I'm just gonna add / callback over here to say that once I come back, redirect me here where I'm gonna be processing the auth callback. Okay, so I'm actually gonna have to add this route, and the way that I add it with my super modern JavaScript framework, right? Just another if statement. So maybe worth adding a little description for where we are logging this location information. Okay. There we go. So I think that's okay. I'm going to copy this redirect URL. I'm going to click next, nothing to link, and just register. So here's the client ID. Before I do that, I'm just going to paste this redirect URL here. So there we go. Client ID, I'm going to go ahead, copy that, paste that here. I think response mode, response type. I want code. Or was it grant type? Can't really specify that here. Yeah, I think response type code, yeah, is what I want. So this is the information that we're going to fill out. We're then going to use the user manager to sign in redirect. So we're going to start the redirect flow, which is going to redirect us to MelderX, obtain our token, and start our application. Okay. And here we're going to be able to specify some additional information like extra query parameters. So the extra query parameters are going to be the ones that are not part of the original oidc specification, but however are required to be passed as part of the app launch. So those are going to be specifically the launch and the audience parameters. Okay. So here, as we're starting on the launch, we're going to have in the search our issuer, which is the audience, and our launch, which is the launch. Okay. So again, in the location search, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create this extra query parameters here as an empty object. And for each auth, I think it is, location, actually no, sorry, for each, there's nothing to iterate over yet. So I'll have the location search. I will split by question mark, and I will want to get the last one. I should only have one question mark. So that's going to give me, the rest of the query string, which is then the query parameters are going to be separated by an ampersand. And each query parameter, I want to go ahead and map to a collection. So I will want to, actually, yeah, I would just split it by the equals. So I will have an array of arrays where an array of arrays and the overarrays, so the array that contains the arrays is just going to be always 2. So key value pairs effectively. Okay. So these are now params. I can have my for auth loop, KV, I will call it, and these are going to be params. Okay. So in here, I will want to get the key and assign it to the value. Okay. Let's just verify this real quick over here that I am getting what I'm intending to get. Let me refresh this, and there we go. Right. So I've remapped the search query to an object with the following keys, but the only thing here is that I want AUD instead of issuer. Okay. So let's say, does this equal issuer? Then say AUD. Otherwise, just return the same thing. Okay. So there we go. I have AUD and launch. All right. Those are my extra query parameters. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And one thing we did set up is scopes. So something that I'm missing from here is once I am initiating this, I have OpenID, profile, we asked for a launch, and patient star.read. Okay. I think that is it. So once we're initializing, sign in redirect. Okay, yeah, let's see where this takes us. I'll refresh this. I'm gonna go ahead and initialize this. So no authority. Aha. So I've not actually specified the authority. So back on here, authority, this URL, right? So where are we actually redirecting? So quite important. Looks like the URL is missing here now for some reason. That was a different screen. So here we are already being redirected to the consent screen, and you can see the information that we're requesting. Okay. So maybe to kind of show you what this looks like from the beginning of the flow, you would open this, it would launch the application. You're getting to the consent screen. I would say allow access. And we're on the callback. So on the callback here, again, this is the location. You can see in the location here, I have the code and the scope, etc. I don't have to parse the callback the same way I parsed it with the issuer and the launch. The beautiful thing here is that the user manager should take care of this. Okay, so we want sign in, redirect, callback, right? So we signed in, redirect, and then this is going to be the callback of that. Okay. On the end of which, once we have processed the callback, we are going to get the result. So console log result. Okay. I'm going to just put this console log of the window a little bit higher. Come back here and load this. No matching state found. So this error means that basically once you start the authentication process, something is going to be saved in the storage, then you're going to get returned here, and it's going to reprocess that stored state and remove it. So you just want to basically start again. Okay, so we're going to click my app again, allow access, and here we are. So in the console, I'm going to be seeing the location and the user that I'm now console logging. Now, as part of the launch flow, something that we're not going to see here, and let me just do this again. You're going to, let me just show this here first. So as part of the obtaining access token, we're going to have the, like, I guess an example. Where can I see this? Bear with me. So yeah, in addition, if the app launched from the patient context, parameters to communicate the context values may be included. For example, a parameter like patient123 would indicate the FHIR resource, right? So effectively in your authentication session, you want to know in which patient's context has this been launched in. So because we're using the user abstraction of the oidc client, it is not FHIR specific. It doesn't look for this information and it doesn't preserve it and it doesn't display it for you, right? So here, if I open this up, I will allow access and we're going to see all the inner workings of things. I'm going to go to the console and we take a look at the user. We're not going to see the patient information. However, if I go to network token, and this is going to be the information that is being sent to MelderX Connect token, right? So the payload will contain the code and the code verifier and the client ID, etc. to obtain the token. In the response, where we get the access token, you're also going to get the additional patient identifier and the patient. Let's say you want this information and you're using this library, or if you're using another library that allows you access to this information, cool. How would you get it? So oidc client does give you like a little bit of a lower abstraction level, which is just the oidc client. So let's come back over here and we are going to get the oidc client. And just for the callback, we're going to new up our oidc client. We're going to give it the exact same configuration. And oidc will have a process sign in response, I think it will be. Yep, sure. And then let's say we'll do this. And I think one thing it will need is the URL. I think it wants it. Okay, and we're gonna have the result there. All right. So with that, let's go again. If we refresh, no state. The thing that initialized the authentication flow is no longer there because we've already processed the callback. So let's go through it. Again, consent screen, and we're here. So we get no state in response right off the bat, which means, or basically, as I found out previously, the way that it's going to correlate the states is where you started from and where you're going to end. So actually here, location href is what you want to pass. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead. Okay, so I reloaded. So the initial, what's it called? Code that we had, the initial code that didn't get processed because we didn't find the found the state now got processed. So if I refresh this, I will get state not found. But anyway, here now you have the information to the patient. So now, if you're going to work against the oidc client, you're going to have information to what you're going to have access to all that underlying information. Okay, if you use the user manager and you don't care too much about the patient ID, you can just use this abstraction. Otherwise, it's this oidc client. You have the process sign in response, after which you can redirect back to the URL, or if you're using any other framework, it's going to look slightly different, but hopefully you get the gist of the moving parts here. Okay. And that is it. We have effectively built a CDS hook app. We have registered it with the workspace. Let's look at it right over here. We have registered the extension over here and we have activated it. Now, whenever we are opening a patient, we're calling that service which can generate a card for us. If the card includes a link to an application effectively, which supports Smart Launch on a URL, you can open that link and it is going to launch an app. It's going to go through an auth flow to obtain a token. And now you can start building your application, which will use a token to call the FHIR API, information for which you can get here. So here is your workspace URL. And you can follow the FHIR specification to read data. If you request different scopes, you can write data back to it. The sky's the limit. And that is it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you have an idea of A, how to build a CDS hook service, B, how to make it launch a smart application, and C is, how you can use MelDirects in order to integrate this process, or maybe just use it for the easy development of your CDS hook service. You can take it without all of the explanations. It can probably take me 20-30 minutes to be CDS hook compliant, all right, from scratch to 100 real quick. So again, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment sections. All of the links will be available in the description. Again, thank you for watching. Hope you have a good day. Happy New Year.